Tonight's episode is comprised of the 2 top vote getters in our recent YouTube poll. If you didn't vote, make sure to watch our community page on YouTube so that you can have more of a say in which stories we do on the show. Here are tonight's 2 stories, both selected by you, our subscribers. First up, Dogman trashed our house. Dear Scary Stories NYC, after our third and youngest got married and moved out, my wife Dee Dee and I set out upon the great vacation of 2004. We visited some places we'd always wanted to see in a touristy way, and then we visited with some relatives. All told, we were gone between 3 and 4 weeks. It might not sound like a lot to you, but we'd never had more than a 3-day weekend off since our childhoods, and we appreciated the vacation. Then, we came home to find that Dogman had trashed our entire downstairs home interior. We know it didn't start happening until the second half of our vacation, because our son spoke to us from his phone on the middle date, and things were fine. We lived then and still now live humbly out in the country, and we didn't think anyone would have a reason to break in, unless there was a monsoon or something of that nature. We didn't have anything worth stealing, to be honest. We locked up when we left, but we didn't expect anything to be disturbed in our absence. Of course, we hadn't taken into account the random trickster nature of the Pennsylvania Dogman. Midway between Lancaster and York, just south of the Susquehanna River, lies a beautiful country and suburban area known as Hellam Township, Pennsylvania. Although it still to this day is like a slice of heaven out there, I have to admit that we don't have the habitat immediately surrounding this area to support a predatory mammal the size of a bear or what we ran into. There are much larger wild areas some miles to the west of here though, such as the Micho State Forest or the Tuscarora State Forest, where predators do sometimes seem to stray over from. In my mind, that's most likely where the Dogman who invaded our space originated from. But then again, that's just a wild guess on my part. I'm telling you where I think the creature was from, but I haven't explained what the creature was yet that I'm talking about. Here's how it all happened. We got to our house just a bit before dawn, and it was still dark outside, but not for much longer. Something seemed wrong or off about the house, so I told Dee Dee that I was going to check things out inside first before we started bringing things in. She fussed over our belongings as I went inside using a small cheap flashlight on my keyring. The front door was open and slightly ajar. Then I noticed there were keys still in the front door lock. Pushing it open enough, I slipped inside. Before I could even see anything, the wall of bad animal odors hit me like bricks. Something had moved in, which did not believe in bathing. The place was a mess, with photos and frames smashed everywhere. Lamps and furniture overturned, and some kind of animal scat around as well. I wondered what kind of a creature would do such a thing when I saw the eye shine coming from the kitchen. Something was hiding behind the kitchen table and chairs, staring in at me. It was impossible to tell how large it was, or if it might belong to a group. I realized that the longer I stood there, the greater the odds became that I might be being surrounded in the darkness. I knew it was time to retreat and call the authorities, but instead I found myself frozen to the spot, unable to move forward or backward. All I could do was stare into those inhuman eyes and remain frozen to that spot, even if it meant remaining in position for the rest of time. People ask me if the animal was hypnotizing me in that moment, and I don't know how to answer. If it wasn't hypnotizing me, then the fear itself was, because I was frozen, as surely as if I had been covered in cement a few days prior. I remember watching the figure rise and emerge from the shadow into the light provided by my feeble keychain flashlight. It was not human. It couldn't be, since humans don't give off eye shine, and this thing did. Even so, as it rose, it did so on two legs, in exactly the way a human being would rise up. I felt such a deep sense of disorientation when that happened. It's difficult to describe. I watched the figure move toward me in the darkness, not even remembering that it was once an option for me to run away. I saw the triangular-shaped animal ears up on top of the fur-covered head of the long-snouted beast, and yet I also saw shoulders and a chest. I didn't see front legs. I saw arms, as this beast with a primitive canine head approached me, bringing its terrible jungle smells along with it. I don't remember what I was thinking. I'm not sure I was still able to think, but I registered what was happening and what was about to happen. And then Dee Dee banged loud on the front door behind me and everything froze. She was asking if it was okay to start bringing our stuff inside. As she banged on the door, it began to swing open, allowing in light from the street lamp outside. For the first time, I could see what had been moving in my direction. It was a dog, and yet it stood like a man. It was not a bear with mange. It was some kind of demonic mockery of a normal animal. It was unclean and hideous. It was something out of hell, or whatever real thing the idea of hell was created out of. I don't know if demons are real, or if that's just a word humans use to describe hideous and filthy things like this one, which had invaded our home. It wasn't like a wolf or a coyote had gotten himself trapped inside our house. No, our house was invaded by a monster. Dee Dee screamed. It was a good long one, like something you'd hear in a particularly violent scene in a horror movie. This was the definition of blood-curdling screams, and it wasn't what our dog-headed demon may have wanted to hear. He turned and ran out of the back of the house, which it turned out had also been unlocked and left open by someone or something. Once the creature was gone, I seemed to have snapped out of my frozen daze, and I ran to Dee Dee, who was pretty shaken up. I found an intact chair to sit her in, and I went about locking the place up and cleaning, bringing in the luggage, and speaking to my wife in a soothing manner. I was the one who had been under the mental control of that entity or animal, but I think it saved me from the intense and damaging shock that my poor wife suffered because of it. So, in addition to the cryptid experience itself, there are additional weird strangenesses about this particular story. For starters, the house was not broken into. The key was in the front door. It was unlocked. The trouble was, I had my key on me, and my wife had hers. So whose key opened the front door and let the Dogman in? When things had calmed down and we got around to discussing this very issue later that night, my wife ran to a drawer in an old table we keep near the front door in the foyer and opened it, looking around inside frantically. When she didn't find what she was looking for, she pronounced the key that opened the front door as the same one that she had left in the drawer in the table. Now, how could that be? How could the front door of the house have been opened using a key that was in a drawer inside the house? Our son and daughter both still had their house keys, but neither of them was in the state of Pennsylvania for the last 15 or 16 days before we got back. So, time went on. Things became a new kind of normal, and this mystery moved into the past, never having been solved. Not just the upright walking, glowing-eyed entity in our home, but also how the key got out of that drawer and into the front door lock. Well, this old story became new again back in December when Dee Dee started telling me that she saw an upright standing white wolf outside our house at night. She says she sees it standing like a meerkat, perfectly still, staring off in the distance, but she can never tell what the creature is looking at. Of course, she never studies it for long, as Dee Dee has a deathly fear of being looked at by one of these dogmen. When she sees one through the window, she wants to get away before it can turn and look back at her. I think she's having a sighting every 4 or 5 days now, and they seem to be coming more frequently. I have not seen one of these new upright wolves myself yet, but I'm not up the same hours of the night that my wife is. So what repels a Pennsylvania dogman? Do any of you know? I could use advice, and I'd be willing to try almost anything at this point. People keep telling me that the only thing cryptids are allergic to is proof that they exist. Set up some trap cameras and the creatures will go away, rather than be photographed or videotaped. I can't tell if people are making fun of me or not when they say things like that, but I am looking into different kinds of cameras now. Who knows? Maybe I'll be able to catch some photographic proof of Dogman so many years after. Dogman trashed our house. We like to give thanks for Stephen Eubanks. Without this Stephen, we'd be like don't even. Please join us in thanking Stephen Eubanks for making this episode possible. In exchange, he gets to see our weekly Secret Sunday Uncensored episodes with all sorts of stuff we're not allowed to discuss on this channel. Henry will be along at the end of the show to explain further, but now let's jump straight into the story voted number 1 in our recent poll on YouTube. And this one is called Dogman, Predator-Prey Alliance. If you were out in nature and you saw a dogman eyeing a squirrel, you might start to feel sorry for that squirrel. But according to some emails we receive, the dogman can occasionally form alliances with smaller creatures in a manner not all that different from how human beings have throughout history relied on other animals to help us hunt. I've cobbled this together from a few separate emails sent to us over the last 14 months or so. Each of them separately is pretty short, but I think you'll see why I think they fit together as the episode progresses. Here's what I call the squirrel and the dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I have a brief but weird dogman story for you from Michigan. We were camping by Horseshoe Lake in Michigan in our RV. It was a sunny day, so even though it was cold in February in northern Michigan, we went for a walk through the woods. So we started to get pelted by acorns and branches, and we made a joke that it was Sasquatch. Soon, overhead, we saw a squirrel dropping stuff on our heads on purpose, and we stood there laughing at him. It seemed more of a summer thing to do than a winter-time pastime, but there he was, furiously trying to get these humans off his squirrel turf. So as we were laughing, all of a sudden a big rock whizzed past us so fast that we could hear it. And it was not coming from that squirrel. We turned and looked, and I saw this dog stand up like he was making sure we saw him. He looked like he was half human, but he was covered in fur, and he had a head like halfway between a wolf and a German shepherd. It looked mean, and we just backed up into our RV for the rest of that morning. I guess that the dogman and the squirrel were going to be carrying out some business over there that they didn't want any witnesses to. It wasn't just a weird experience. It was double weird because it really seemed almost as though the squirrel and the dogman were working together. You know, dear viewers, thinking back on our previous story about the dogman trashing that couple's house, couldn't a helper like this squirrel have gone inside the house and retrieved the key from the drawer to let the dogman in? Of course, that presupposes that the squirrel or the dogman knew where the key was hiding. And how exactly would they know that? Anyway, just a thought. Here's one about 3 family dogs who all seem to pay pagan tribute to the local Dogman, who the humans had not even been previously aware of. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I moved to northern Wisconsin when I got a break on a property that was supposed to be haunted and unsellable. I was going through a tough period, and that property gave me a place to splash down. My 3 dogs and I were able to hunt to survive until my fortunes changed. Suddenly I was wealthy and able to give my dogs steak as snacks in addition to their dog food. They had been my friends during my lowest time. I wanted to reward them now that I could. I began to notice when the dogs got bones, the bones were always gone by the next morning. I wondered where they were burying them or what they were doing with them, and I began to muse upon the secret lives of my dogs. So, one night, I watched out the back window when the dogs thought I wasn't watching them. They each brought their bones and their steak to this one back corner of our yard. I looked again in the morning and it was all gone. Something had eaten or taken the meat. I made a point of paying attention to the dogs at night after that, and I noticed this pattern repeating. So I asked my veterinarian friend what would make a dog give up the best part of its meal to someone or something else. The vet was stumped. In fact, by the way he was looking at me, he didn't seem to be wondering if the dogs were the crazy ones. I decided to stay up late one night and see what was taking the meat that my dogs were leaving. Staying up late on an animal watch can seem exciting at first, but it quickly becomes boring. After that, it begins to feel foolish, and then you feel both impatient and silly in increasing amounts until you fall asleep in your chair and are awakened by the sound of your own dogs whimpering together, each from their own separate sleeping space. Fully awake and shivering all over, I wanted to know what the dogs were unhappy about. Looking out the window, I saw a great, dark, shadowy form appearing at the edge of the woods to eat the food that had been given him by my own animals. I couldn't see what it was, but I saw it there, and I saw that it was large. And then, the figure, having finished what it wanted, reared backward like a horse rising on its hind legs. Only this behemoth, very nearly as tall as a horse while on its hind legs, settled down into a bipedal position and fell no further down toward the ground. Because I had horses on the brain for whatever reason, I at first interpreted the long-snouted head as belonging to a horse. The mane was missing, the fur was too long and shaggy, and I could see its gritted teeth on either side of that snout. Although the ears stood up like those of a horse, the rest of the head looked far more like a primitive wolf or canine than anything equine. When it stood up like that and walked away like a man, I could see that it had hand-like paws and foot-like paws, but it had no hooves in either case. This was something more like a wolf man than a horseman. I watched as the incredible bipedal giant, which had to be at least 8 feet tall, probably even taller, turned and walked back into the woods and away from our property. Then my 3 dogs got up, walked in circles a few times, and settled back down to sleep again. The show was over for the night. So I actually lived with that pagan canine earth deity or whatever it was living behind my house, being worshipped by my dogs. I did it for most of another month, and then I moved out. I've been wanting to sell the property, but unable to. A few years ago, this guy from the Ho-Chunk Nation took over as watchman, and we haven't had any more Dogman reports since then. I don't know if those 2 facts are related or not. When I bought the property, people said it was haunted. Now they say the Dogman is there. I just wish I could unload it and put this chapter of my life firmly in the past. Here's one more weird example of a dogman forming an alliance with a house pet. In this case, it was a cat called Mouser in a story we're gonna call Cat Trades Cat Food for Mice. Dear Scary Stories NYC, when I first got my cat we can call Mouser, the house I lived in was filled with mice. It took less than a year for that cat to commit mousy genocide, and I thought we would live happily ever after. It turned out that Mouser didn't want to live without the thrill of the chase, and so he imported new mice with help from his ally, who happened to be a large, upright walking canine, or vulpine, bipedal predator. Here's how it happened, to the best of my memory. This was 2017 or 2018, early in the year, and we just had our first big snow. Mouser and I always get up just a few minutes before the sun, no matter what day of the year. I wanted to feed Mouser his breakfast indoors because the backyard was all snowed over. Mouser was freaking out. He wanted to do his morning ritual with his food. I tried to talk him out of it, but he was adamant, so I opened the kitchen door and placed his plastic cat food bowl down for him. Mouser had this weird thing he liked to do, where he would grab the plastic food bowl in his mighty jaws, lift it up, and carry it all the way to the edge of the yard. He seemed to dance around out there afterward, and it made him happy, so I didn't really pay too much attention to it. Of course my cat is weird because, he's my cat, right? So on this morning it was still dark, but everything was covered in virgin snow, and I was able to see things that on most mornings I might not be able to notice. When Mouser brought his cat food out to the edge of our property, he was met by some other figure, some large, dark, hairy creature, down on all fours behind some trees from my perspective. It sure looked to me as though the other creature had taken the cat food bowl away, and in its place, my Mouser was dancing around, his eyes wide open, doing something ridiculously cute. And then, I could swear, I made out that he was chasing one or more mice. Maybe they were moles or voles or some other sort of little rodent, but Mouser had traded his cat food breakfast for some live mice to chase. Who would make that kind of a trade with a cat? And if it were not a human, then what animal would be capable of creating such a bargain? Even as these questions ran through my mind, I saw the cat food bowl put back in place, and I saw the quadrupedal animal stand up, revealing a bipedal height well in excess of the size of any human. It was as tall as a tall bear, but the silhouette was of something canine. I only saw it as it walked away deeper into the woods, but it walked like a man. My cat was bartering with the North American upright walking canid, better known as the Dogman. I moved in with my family soon after that, as my view of nature changed drastically on that morning. I now live in the city with my girlfriend, and we both admit that when it comes to the Dogman, we are absolute chickens. And so that wraps up our collection of odd narratives people have sent to us concerning Dogman forming cross-species alliances in order to further combined aims. We'll be back tomorrow with more Dogman stories, including a special secret uncensored story for our channel members. Here's Henry Lee Dogman to tell you more about that. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.